911 operators at Reddit. What's the most disturbing or scary call you ever received? Throwaway, as my place really doesn't like us talking about work outside of work. Had a call for a brother who killed his other brother with a hammer, the pick part, while the victim's little daughter was watching. The daughter called us from another room and told us her daddy's eye fell out. Perp was apprehended. Daughter taken by relative. Had to smoke after that one. And I don't even smoke. I had a woman call in who was hiding in her closet and told me her ex-boyfriend was breaking into her house. She told me that they had a violent history. I got her information and told her to do what she needed to do to stay safe and leave the line open no matter what. While officers were en route, I heard him come in through a window and start beating her. He heard sirens coming and took off. Luckily, since she left the line open, I was able to let the officers know when he took off and they caught him near the apartment. I think the worst part was the 2 minutes after he left. I sat there listening to the woman weeping and not being able to comfort her because she was too far away to hear me. 1979 New York City. Got a call from a crying child, a little boy, saying his mom and dad were fighting and his dad said he was going to throw the mom out of the window. I could hear a terrible fight going on in the background, woman screaming, things breaking, and yelling, etc. The poor kid didn't know his address. We didn't have the technology for call ID and would have to use reverse telephone books. A trace would take forever. Anyway, while I'm trying to get the address, I hear a horrific scream and glass breaking. A few seconds later, the other operators in the room are getting calls about a woman lying in the courtyard who came out of a window. Very sad. Worst of all is that I am sure someone else in this apartment building must have heard this fight, but no one called for help until it was too late. Poor kid. Working 911 in Nick during the 70s 80s was a nightmare. The toughest ones for me involve kids. Anytime a parent finds their child dead is especially tough. The single worst call I've ever taken though was a woman who was calling in that she was hearing weird noises in her house. While walking through her house, she started screaming and told me there was someone in her house. There were a couple soft pops followed by a gargling sound. After the officers had cleared the house and found her, it finally came out during the investigation that her adult son had killed her while high and freaking out. Gunshots don't sound like you'd think on the phone. They're rather soft. It's an eerie sound. Something so violent being so soft that if you aren't paying attention you can miss it. In true Reddit style. I'm not quite the intended target of this question as I don't actually answer the calls myself. But my job does involve me listening to a lot of them after they've happened. The one that sticks with me the most was a man who was paralyzed from the waist down and had phoned up to tell us that he was midway through attempting to amputate his own legs at the thigh using nothing but a hacksaw and a Stanley knife. He'd laid newspaper down on the floor and everything, in an attempt not to get blood on the carpet. Naturally, not long into the call he passed out due to blood loss. Grim stuff. He'd laid newspaper down on the floor and everything, in an attempt not to get blood on the carpet. How considerate. Well, there's a lot of love for us lately. In another thread and an AMA that I did, I told my story of having to stay on the phone with a young man for about 40 minutes, maybe a little more, who had a very disturbed man break into his home and with a loaded shotgun pointed at his face the entire time, demand that he call the police. He wanted a suicide by cop. I now realize that I didn't get overly detailed about it in my other mentionings of it. But this young man urinated himself, almost threw up, and was begging me to keep him alive. I haven't dreamt about it in a long time. It was several years ago, but it stuck with me. Another Nick received an anonymous call that a patrol car, RMP, was parked in the middle of a street in Harlem with the doors open and no police officer in sight. We used to get tons of prank calls, but after a while your gut tells you when they're real. They found the officer several blocks away. He had been shot and then dragged by the perp's car for several blocks. Terrible. 2 Christmases ago, my uncle, who's a police officer, was working during the day. He got to work when they got a call from an elderly woman who was having a heart attack and gave him the address. Turns out it was his own mother. He got there and tried CPR before the EMTs got there, but there was nothing they could do. Edit. It's kinda strange, but stuff that sounds the most dramatic: people getting severely beaten during a call. Or being shot at. Admitting to a murder they committed in the last 30 seconds, or even people killing themselves while they are on the phone to me. That doesn't bother me too much. But give me a distressed elderly person and I get a lump in my throat. Combine that with any one of the above and it turns into a bit of a shitty shift. We've all got our triggers, and sometimes the least spectacular stuff can be the hardest to deal with. 100% agree. One of the most heart-wrenching calls I ever took was from an elderly woman who had to call in for retrieval. Her husband passed away during the night. And despite knowing it was going to happen any day, she was completely beside herself. I've lost my best friend. My best friend in the whole wide world. I will never forget that. Or the way she said it. My father was a 911 call taker. The worst calls he got were suicide calls where pretty much all he heard was someone immediately saying hello. My name is John Doe and I live at 123 ABC Street and I'm going to kill myself. Bang. How terrible. Got a call a few years ago. Lady's house was on fire. And her daughter was stuck in a back room. The flames were too much and too high. And she couldn't get through them to get to the girl. So I got to sit on the phone and listen to A little girl burn to death, and B, the mom scream and cry as she watched. It was 5 years ago and the sound still haunts me. I thought of a second one. Had a guy who called in reporting his son was unconscious and not breathing. He was as calm as could be about it. 2. Said he left the room for just a second and when he came back he found him this way. But he wasn't panicked. Wasn't worried. Just talking like he was telling me about his day. Kept trying to get him to start CPR. And he treated it like a chore. Turns out, the kid started crying and the dad got frustrated and beat him to death. Kid was 2. I was a 911 call taker dispatcher in Portland. And received a call from a strung out girl. Story was she said her boyfriend had been doing meth for 3 days and owned a lab. She was screaming that he had wiggly purple worms in his arms and there was blood everywhere. Turned out that they were his veins. He was literally out of his gourd on crystal meth. And tearing at his flesh and ripping out his veins. I did not want to live my life on their night shift taking calls like that, so it wasn't long before I switched professions. My sister got a call from a woman whose son was out in the yard playing football. He threw the ball over a fence and jumped over the fence to retrieve it. Everything went normal there. But when he landed in the neighbor's yard, the guy was on his back porch balls deep in a pig. When the cops came, he said he does it because his wife is a crack WH-ray and he doesn't want to get AIDS. There was a young boy about 3 trapped in his parents' trailer that was on fire. We knew he was in there. The grandmother had gotten all the kids out but that one. She thought maybe he went and hid or something. The fire department did everything they could, even at great personal risk, but in the end the child had died of smoke inhalation. It was a painful 2 hours as they fought the fire and tried to save him. Though after the first half hour we were pretty sure he couldn't have survived. My son was about the same age as that boy and it hit me hard. I probably should have gotten grief counseling or something, but they didn't do that for dispatchers at the time. My stepdad's a firefighter and he told this story to me and my sister about 5 years ago and it stuck with me. As a firefighter he also attends car crashes to help cut people out, etc. The story he told us was that he was called to a lorry and car collision. Which never end well really. In the car were 3 adults and 1 young girl about 6-7. If memory serves me right, it was the family friend driving. With the others in the back with the little girl in the middle back seat. They crashed into a lorry and the car went under it, decapitating all the adults but missing the girl. She had to sit in that car, surrounded by the decapitated bodies of her family and friend for around 4 hours before they could get her out. He also told us about how when brains are splattered across the windscreen it reminds him of raw mints. I guess when you deal with that stuff a lot you grow kind of immune to it. Edit. Should clarify. A lorry is the British term for truck. Like a 8-wheeler truck for transporting things. As a 911 dispatcher, please read the following. This question is great on Reddit. And even in a personal question with a close friend. But please, 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 do not ask this question in public. And especially at any social format. Many of us dispatchers have very difficult calls that can linger with us for years. It can be hard to talk about. And in front of a group gathering. It can induce anxiety. Just bear that in mind. Thanks. Not a 911 operator, but my aunt is. The call she hated the most was trying to coach a new mother to give CPR to a 5-week-old that died while she was still on the line before paramedics could get there. It's hard to do that with such young babies. You have to use the fingers and just press down. It's tough. That's why I believe all new parents should have to take CPR classes. Why have only babysitters do it to watch your kid? I mean, it's your kid. I've had to give my brother the Heimlich maneuver twice in his 10 years of life. It's good to know. My grandmother was a fire dispatcher a long time ago since she passed away in the early 90s. So this likely predates 911 service. She told me a story about a call that she received from a parent whose house was on fire. Neither parent had gotten their child out of the house and she was pleading her to get the fire depth there quickly since the fire was too bad to go back in. Suffice to say the child did not make it. I can't even imagine the guilt that the couple had and the blame that they shared, or even blaming each other for not grabbing their child. For me, it was a lady calling to say she was just arped and beaten. Someone had broken in her house. Followed by, "Oh my god. He's back. Help." Then the line goes dead. I send officers for an active home invasion. Have him standing by. She was lying. Her boyfriend had broke up with her for cheating on him. And she threatened to call police if he left. He did. And she followed through. She got arrested. That's a special level of crazy. XGF's mom is an operator. Call early Sunday morning from a 6-year-old girl saying there was a man in the backyard making a lot of noise. She said the man had her parents and they both weren't moving. The little girl said the man knew she was in the house and he told her to call the police. She then said the man was coming inside. The phone fell to floor ground and that was the end of the call. Still gives me the chills. Lots of unanswered questions. Call received from mother of a female in her 20s stating a former customer, male 60s, was on his way to her house. Male was jealous of female's boyfriend and was coming there to confront her. Male arrives. Breaks through front door. All but 2 occupants flee out back door. 2 occupants lock themselves in a bedroom. Male shoots through the door. Kills boyfriend. Female's uncle comes in and hits the male in the head with frying pan. Police arrive and arrest jealous former customer for murder. This is going to get ridiculously buried. But my dad's cousin, call him Rick, is a dispatcher for our local police station, and even hearing his story gives me chills. He got a call at about 4 in the afternoon from an elderly man who calmly explained that he and his wife had nothing left to live for. He told Rick that they were going to kill themselves. He just wanted the police to know because nobody would have found them, as they lived on a mountain in the middle of nowhere. The man gave him their address and names. And Rick heard 2 gunshots and then nothing. Damn, that story creeps me out. Not me. But my friend's dad is a police dispatcher. Just this past year he got a call from a friend of his daughter that she found her dad passed out in the house and not breathing. Her dad had died of a major heart attack. She had just had a baby and already had huge mental health issues, so the loss of her dad was obviously devastating. My friend's dad, the dispatcher, immediately texted his daughter to get in touch with the other girl because he thought she might try and hurt or kill herself. Fortunately she didn't, but I can only imagine getting the call from a family friend that their dad stopped breathing. I was also working the night John Lennon was killed. Call came in as a male shot Idaho, Dakota. When we learned from dispatch that it was John Lennon, the whole floor 200 plus people just went silent. The Beatles were the first album I owned. For me, it was the end of something so ethereal I can't even name it, possibly the ideal that we might be able to change the world for the better. Just leave this thread. You really don't want to read any of these. Nope. I plan on having a good day today. Not gonna read any of these. You know you want to.